The names aren't random. They have specific purposes. Sometimes it's a shape, such as the deltoid. Here's the shoulder muscle. Can you give it the deltoid, Mike? There it is. You can trace it. It's a deltoid shape. On the back, we have my turn. We have the trapezius, the trap here. And it's a trapezoid shape. We also sometimes have location. In the case of latissimus dorsi, or the lat, you see latissimus means wide, certainly it's wide, and dorsi means back. Okay, so we have shape, we have location, we also have head. So if we look at the tricep brachii, brachii means arm, tricep, 3 heads. And you can see this massive muscle, often the largest muscle in the upper arm, tricep brachii. The other brachii, bicep brachii, bi meaning 2 heads. And we go on down, there's the brachioradialis. Brachii means arm, and radialis is the top bone of the forearm, so this muscle traces the radial bone. And then finally we have something called the sternocleidomastoid. So, remember there, Mike? Sternum, sterno, Cleido referring to clavicle, mastoid attaches here to the back of the head. So these names are not random. They usually have a purpose, and we could go on, and you would see most of them make sense. All right. Thank you, Mike.
I mentioned here most muscle names are in Latin, some are in Greek, and that's an international language. So if we're talking to someone in a different country, the brachioradialis is still the brachioradialis. Brachia means arm, so when you see that word brachii, then you're thinking it's something to do with the arm. Brachioradialis, that was the big forearm muscle. Biceps brachii and brachialis, all part of the arm. Location is often used for describing a muscle, and let's look at rectus abdominis. Well, in this case, rectus means straight, but abdominus, we think of abdomen. And there's also the transversus abdominis. Here, there's 3 layers really of abdominal muscles. Rectus femoris, we think of femur or femoris as thigh, so we have those straight or rectus femoris, and the bicep femoris on the back of the leg. 2 heads, of course. Wrist, carpi. You'll see lots of muscle names in the forearm with carpi in it, and so that refers to the wrist. Ulnaris, the ulna. So we have the ulna here, ulnaris, flexicarpi ulnaris. So we actually have the action name and 2 location names. So at first when people study anatomy, they think, oh, it's just a bunch of like crazy words. But no, this muscle flexes, it inserts at the wrist, and it lies along the ulna, the bone of the forearm. That makes a lot of sense. Pectoralis, pectoralis means chest, so we have the pectoralis major, and a smaller muscle is the minor. So temporalis, think of temporal over here. Frontal or frontalis, the front. Palmaris, which is the, we can trace it back from the hand really. It's the flexor, so palm side, right there, dead ends into the palm, and it is long. Still location, orbicularis oculi, oculi meaning eye. Nasalis, of course, nose. Tibialis anterior, I like that name. Tibia, think of the bone on the anterior part of the lower leg. And there it is, tibialis anterior. Sternocleidomastoid, we saw this muscle on Mike in the video. Sternum, insertion on, origin on the sternum. Passes by the clavicle, attaches to the mastoid process of the occipital bone. Sternocleidomastoid. mastoid. Still on location. I hope you're starting to see a pattern here. Well, it's not always just one feature. In this case, it is. Supra means above. Supraspinatus. It's above the spine of the scapula. Or how about infraspinatus? Infra means below. See, it's all starting to make sense. Latissimus dorsi, we saw this muscle on Mike. It's a very wide, lat means wide, dorsi means the back. So it's a wide muscle of the back. Indeed it is. Let's look at the legs. These make sense too. If you think of the word vastus as being large, then we have the lateral vastus, which on the outside. We have the rectus femoris, which is, we know rectus means straight. And we have the vastus intermedius, which is underneath, we can't see it here. And the vastus medialis on the midline, which there should be a green arrow right to there. All right. Shape. We looked at this on Mike. If you remember, he flexed his deltoid for us, and it is a triangular shaped muscle if you look at it in the right perspective. Serratus anterior. If you ever had a serrated knife, it has a jagged edge, and this muscle does have a jagged appearance. And it's on the front, serratus anterior. Gastroc, well, gastro means stomach, and I guess these do look rather stomach-shaped. Gastrocnemius. Underneath the soleus is, like, have you ever had fillet of sole? This muscle is shaped somewhat like the sole, like a fish. Gracilis gracile, it's about as thick as your thumb. And that's an adductor there. Tensor fascia, which tensor means to stretch. And fascia is band. We have adductor longus. Adduct means to bring this leg to the midline, so when this muscle shortens, the whole leg is going to move inwards medially. Magnus means big. I'm sorry, magnus means large. And this is a hard one to find sometimes. Even though it is large, it's deep to the gracilis and the longus. Pectoralis major, I mentioned these, and minor, larger, smaller. Size, we've been talking about minor and major. Brevis, short. And that's different than minimus, or minimi really, which means small. Oops, here we go, small. Teres major is the larger, and my students often do this to the right. Here's a model, and they'll put little stickums on here. You'll see that the teres major is larger than the teres minor. Yeah. And this sometimes can be confusing because the minor is on top, and you think, well, if it's higher, it's major, but they go by muscle size here. Direction of fascicles and fibers. I've talked about rectus femoris. Rectus means straight. Rectus abdominis is straight. Transverse abdominis is at a transverse direction. And external or internal obliques is at oblique to the midline, angular. Number of origins. Quadricep. You've probably heard the quadriceps. It's really one muscle in a sense. They all attach at the ligament here, or tendon, excuse me. But we separate them into the four heads: vastus lateralis, rectus femoris, intermedius, and medialis. I've talked about tricep brachii. We saw that on Mike. 3 heads, tricep. So 3 heads of the arm, because brachii means head. 2 heads of the arm as well. And the forearm, sometimes students have a lot of problems with forearms. Really, all their actions are the same. These are all extensors. And so we just take a look. The radius is on the thumb side of the arm. So extensor carpi. It's going to attach at the wrist. Carpi means wrist. Good name. Extensor digitorum. And good name because it's going to go right into the digits. Digit means fingers. Look at that. Carpi digiti minimi, which should be on the green right there. And digit means finger, and minimi means small. Yeah. And finally, the ulnaris is going to follow the ulna, the elbow bone, elbow side of the arm. Tensor, we looked at tensor, stretch or tighten. Adductor longus, we looked at that one. So I know this seems like a lot of repetition, but what you'll find is it's much easier to look at the word and make sense out of it than just try to memorize it. Because some students will do that. They'll just memorize, instead of looking at the direction of the muscle fiber and looking at what it does, where it's located, and trying to figure out even the sartorius, kind of S-shaped Taylor's muscle there. It becomes fun in a sense. Now it doesn't always, like here's a pectineus, that's not so simple in the psoas muscle. So there are some muscles that don't follow the usual pattern, but for the most part, it's a very, it makes sense. Just be patient with it. Thanks for listening.